Today we are going to be looking at the order of operations, a concept hopefully most of us are familiar with, so this will be a really quick, painless review. Before we do that though, we're going to get into one more term that will help us to do a lot of what's going to be asked of us in this section. So if it asks us to evaluate, that's simply a term that means to find the value of an expression. So for example, if it asked us to evaluate 3 to the 5th power, 3 to the power of 5, we remember that an exponent tells us how many times to use the base as a factor in multiplication. So this 3 to the 5th tells us that we're going to do 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. We're going to multiply 3 by itself for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3's as factors. So when we simplify this, we think 3 and 3, 9, times 3 and 3 is 9, times 3, 9 and 9 is 81, times 3, which leaves us with 243. You could pull out a calculator if you need to do 9 times 9 times 3, hopefully not 9 times 9, but 81 times 3 to find 243. So now, this gets us into what is the order of operations. Now, if I asked, you could probably spit out, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS." Now, I have one issue with PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, as it's kind of misleading, because P, which would stand for parentheses, is not quite that. Also, this MD, then AS, makes us think that we have to do multiplication and then division, and then addition, then subtraction. So, I'm going to suggest that we look at our order of operations as such. And we can call it GEMDAS. So G standing for what is in grouping symbols. Some grouping symbols that we may look at may be parentheses, they may be brackets, they may be absolute values, which we'll look at a little bit later on, or they may be fraction bars. We could use fraction bars as grouping symbols as well, meaning the top is a group and the bottom's a group. E, we look at exponents. MD, we look at multiplication. We look at multiply, and divide together from left to right, whichever happens first, going from left to right. And then we look at addition and subtraction. We add and subtract, again from left to right, as we would read it across the page. So, if we had to evaluate this expression, this expression, 16 minus 8 divided by 2 to the second power plus 14. We're going to use this order of operations, so grouping symbols, then exponents, then multiplying and dividing left to right, then adding and subtracting left to right, to go through and to evaluate, to simplify, to find the simplest value of this expression. So, we look for grouping. Do we have parentheses? Do we have brackets, absolute values? No, we don't have any of that. So we can skip G. E, exponents. We're going to go ahead and simplify this looking at the exponents. So we're going to have 16 minus 8 divided by, what's 2 to the second power? That's 4 plus 14. Now, so we have 16 minus 8 divided by 4 plus 14. So then we did our exponents. We're going to multiply and divide from left to right. So we have 16 minus 8 divided by 4 plus 14. We have this division here, so 8 divided by 4. So we're now going to have 16 minus 2 plus 14. And now we're going to add and subtract from left to right. So we have 16 minus 2, which is going to give us 14, plus 14. 14 plus 14 is going to leave us with 28. Now, in the event that we have some grouping symbols, let's look at a couple with some different grouping symbols. So if we were to look at 4 divided by 2, you know what, I'm going to go on to this side because that's what I do, so that we remember that it's less than 1.2. So if we have 4 divided by 2 plus 5 times the group 10 minus 6, and we're going to have, remember, our G, E, M, D, A, S as a reminder of what happens in which order. If you need to go back and look at what each of those stands for, go for it. So we're going to look first in our grouping. 4 divided by 2 plus 5 times the group, 10 minus 6. We're going to simplify that group. So we have 4 divided by 2 plus 5 times 10 minus 6, which is 4. Now we're going to do multiplication and division from left to right, since we don't have any exponents. So we're going to do 4 divided by 2, and we can also at the same time do 5 times 4. So 4 divided by 2, that becomes 2, plus 5 times 4, we have 20. 2 plus 20 equals 22. And there's our simplified value. Let's look at if we had another grouping symbol. So if we had 6 with an open bracket, 32 minus the group 2 plus 3 to the second power, close bracket. So we're going to start with our innermost grouping symbols. Well, first we see that we have this big bracket, so we're going to do anything in that big bracket first before we involve this 6. So anything in this big bracket first. So we will look inside this big bracket. Oh, we have a little grouping, so 2 plus 3 first. So we're going to have 6 times 32 minus 2 times 3 becomes 5 to the second power. So now inside this grouping, we got to take care of this exponent right here. So we're going to have 6 times the group, 32 minus 5 squared, or 5 times 5, which is 25. I'm now going to simplify inside this group, so I'm going to take 6 times the group, so 32 minus 25, that simplifies to 7. And now I have multiplication on its own, 6 times 7 for a simplified value of 42. Let's look one more time at another example, this time involving a fraction bar as our grouping symbol. So if we look at, and we have 2 to the third power minus 5 over 15 plus 9. I'm going to do everything on the top before I touch anything on the bottom. And I'm not going to do anything top versus bottom until both are simplified. So looking at the top here we have 2 to the third power minus 5. I'm going to simplify that 2 to the third power, in which 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So we're going to have 8 minus 5 over 15 plus 9. I'm going to simplify the top of that fraction even further, so 8 minus 5 is 3 over 15 plus 9. Now that my top of my fraction is a constant in itself, it's just 3, I'm going to look at the denominator. So 15 plus 9, that's going to be 3 over 15 plus 9, which is 24. Now, all the time with fractions, we have to check, is it possible to reduce? Is there a factor of 3 and 24 that we can divide both by? Yes, and that's 8. Or not 8, sorry. We're going to divide both by 3, leaving us with 1 over 8. And that is our final simplified evaluation of 2 to the third power minus 5 over 15 plus 9. As we use our order of operations, we got down to see that it is equal to 1/8. All right? Go ahead, take your time, rewatch this portion of the video if we need to, so that we can see how to evaluate in the event that we have grouping or not. All right, our next step in using order of evaluations is going to be to further evaluate. And this time we're going to evaluate the expression 3x squared plus 2y plus, that's 2y plus z cubed if x equals 4, y equals 5, and z equals 3. So we're going to evaluate the expression 3x squared plus the group 2y plus z cubed if x equals 4, y equals 5, and z equals 3. So our very first step that we're going to do is we're going to plug in all of the values that we've been given. So we are going to take 4 in for x, so we'll have 3 times 4 squared plus the group 2 times what's y, 5, plus what is z, 3 cubed. And now we're going to evaluate just as we have been. So we're going to start with our grouping. Remember, we have G, E, M, D, and A, S right there for our order of operations. So in our grouping, we're going to look inside. We don't have any other grouping, but we have exponents. So we're going to have 2 times 5 plus 3 to the third power. So 3 times 3 times 3, that's 9 times 3, which is 27. Now inside our group, we're going to do our multiplication. So we'll have 10 plus 27. And then inside that group, we're going to do 10 plus 27 to be plus 37. Now this 3 times 4 squared has just been trailing along the whole time. And now I think it's time to tackle that. So we start with our exponents, because we have 3 times 4 squared. The squared applies to the 4. So we're going to evaluate our exponents, and we're going to have 3 times 16 plus 37. And now we're going to do our multiplication from left to right. So 3 times 16, and we're going to get 48. 3 times 16 is 48. So then 48 plus 37, when we simplify that, we're left with 85. Alright, go ahead and rewatch this portion if you need to before you do your next example. Remember, we're plugging in the values that we know and then following the order of operations to evaluate from there. Alright, let's look at our assignment, our practice problems for lesson 1.2, order of operations. We're going to be looking at page 120, numbers 15 through 35, and just the odds. Just the odds. Remember, when we start, we put the assignment at the top of a brand new page. At brand new page, we start, and we put our first thing there. So 15 reads 7 to the second power, and we're going to show every single step of our work, just as we have all lessons. Show every single step of your work so that you can follow every process, every thought that comes through your head. So we're going to have 7 times 7, which we know to be 49. All right? This one will take more steps. Please use one line per step. Use all of the space. And then after 15, we would go to 17 because we are just doing the odds. So we have page 120, 15 through 35 odds. Have fun.